Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you're all well on this marvellous Monday. That's it. It's a new week, new day, new everything. Except not a new topic, as we will be talking about the Idaho 4 case today. Surprise. But I do feel that there is a lot for us to talk about, which is pretty amazing. Not as amazing as you, however. You are looking absolutely amazing this morning. How do you do it? What is your secret? Let me know, because I feel like death today. I think I'm getting a cold, a flu. But anyway, I'm still going to crack on, push on, move forward. As like I say, we've got a lot of stuff to go through. And the first topic of the day, as this is video 1 of certainly going to be 2. Might be 3, but certainly going to be 2, as we talk about the potential damage that Steve Goncalves has done to the Idaho 4 case, and in fact has this latest airmail release by Howard Bloom, has it made it very, very possible that this could play into what will happen at Bryan Kohberger's next hearing. Now, we know that Bryan Kohberger is in court just in a few weeks' time, and they will be looking for a motion to dismiss, quash, revert back to preliminary hearing. As certainly they have a problem surrounding the grand jury and whether it was bias, whatever. But I don't think the biased nature of the grand jury is perhaps the main point that they should now be pushing. I think that potentially it's whether they were leaking information. Because I'm going to read you an excerpt. I think there's a couple of bits from the Howard Bloom piece of information, and it specifically details that it would seem that Steve Goncalves had a conduit directly to via his, a conduit means that there's something that gives them access to something else, and it would appear that Steve Goncalves had a conduit to the grand jury, and they were giving information to a member of the FBI, I do believe, that was then relaying that information on. Not fucking great, considering that we have this case. And look, Steve Goncalves, bless him, I've stated that the way in which Steve Goncalves has behaved, I feel I would be worse. So this is potentially playing out in the manner with which this would have happened had I have been in his shoes. And it probably would have been exacerbated even further because I would have potentially been worse. But look, this is what we're going to talk about now, because there's some information in here which is pertinent to this case as well, and there are elements to it that it does blow your mind. And so prepare, if you didn't watch my video the other day, prepare to have your mind blown. If you saw it, let's blow it a little bit more. So look, we are going to look at this section here. Just bear with me while I just scroll to here. So this is where it all starts. So it says, but not all of Steve's investigative efforts had been in vain. He had assembled a retinue of blue-chip sources that he revealed to several friends, including an FBI agent in the St. Louis office, who had shared his personal email so that his bosses in the bureau wouldn't learn that he was communicating with Steve. Blows your fucking mind, doesn't it? Blows your mind that you've got a guy who's an agent in the FBI who's done stuff so he could relay information to Steve. He obviously wants to do that secretly, and then this article then blows that up out of the water. Right, so I wouldn't learn he was communicating with Steve. A handful of additional sympathetic law enforcement officers, and most helpful of all, a conduit to 2 of the grand jurors who had been on the panel that had voted to indict Bryan Kohberger. That's correct, you heard that correctly. So he has a conduit to 2 of the jurors. And what do we know about the jurors? We know that there was issues with the jury selection, don't we? We know that they had stated that there was a potential that at least one of the jurors had a criminal conviction. So that straight away then makes you think, so was it this one with the criminal conviction that was leaking information? Or was it one that perhaps English wasn't their first language and they didn't understand that they couldn't share information. Who knows? But there certainly is a few things amiss. So we go on. And in the process, he had compiled some startling revelations, hard-won information that he had triumphantly disclosed to his newfound internet associates. So this is where it goes on to talk about the Dickies outfit, the fact that there was a receipt found. Obviously, we don't know what happened. Like, people talk about these Dickies overalls, these coverall things, you know, the Michael Myers outfit. You know, he could have bought them for his father. We was leading up to the Christmas period. His father's a HVAC guy, and you know, it's possible. It's possible. The knife a little bit, because it goes on to say that there was a receipt for a knife here as well, which is going to change a lot of people's perception of Brian Koberger if they were in the camp of he's not involved in this at all. I've been there. That is not a helpful thing, but it would appear that the push on this with Steve Goncalves is certainly that he believes that there is more than one person involved. The entire way that this is handled and worded goes to push that there is more than one person involved. And video 2 today will be touching on the informant side of things. And video 3 / possibly 1 tomorrow, depending on how my day goes, will be touching very, very firmly back on the 2 surviving roommates, as there is some information regarding them, which we are going to briefly touch on in a second, which is further leaked by the grand jury, which, again, it will blow your mind. Right, so let's just skip through what we don't need to see. This talks about the knife sheath. So it says, even more troubling, if true, was that Steve had learned from people who had spoken to members of the grand jury. So this is further just saying that the grand jury would just apparently just talking willy-nilly to whoever they fucking felt like it, apparently, who had been presented with the prosecution's case. It centred on the alleged behaviour of the 2 roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. Which, look, at the end of the day, what I will say is, regardless of what they did, I'm pleased that these 2 girls did not get caught up in this further. They didn't further become actual victims. You know, that is a good thing. It centred on the alleged behaviour of the 2 roommates who had miraculously survived the night unscathed. Just thought I'd read that again. How he wondered, could they have slept blissfully unaware through the savage pre-dawn stabbing murders of 4 people in a narrow house with paper-thin walls. So this is alluding to the fact, this is Steve Goncalves, remember, so he is telling us now that the walls within that house are paper-thin, which up until now I weren't aware of, but he is talking about the fact that, look, he's obviously been in here and he's aware of what's going on. So you've got to take that into consideration. And it's things like this why that house should not be knocked down. Because it's things like this that people need to understand. The jurors need to understand that how noise would carry through there. What is the likelihood of the surviving roommates not hearing what was going on? And if they didn't, why didn't they? Because one person could not have subdued all of these victims to the point where they couldn't speak, they couldn't shout out, they couldn't do anything. Now, multiple people might have been able to do so, but one person couldn't. But paper-thin walls. Later, a police affidavit revealed that one of the survivors, Dylan Mortensen, had in fact heard noises and left her room not only to spot a masked, darkly clad intruder making his way through the residence before she retreated to her room and did not summon help for another 8 hours for reasons that have never been revealed. But look, yet Steve had been told that the 2 survivors allegedly had not only been awake while the killings had taken place, but they had heard everything. More astonishingly, his grand jury sources alleged that the 2 girls had been texting one another as the murderer methodically went from one room to the next. We'll just let the dust settle on that. And it does go on, but like I say, we're going to touch on that in a different video, because that in itself deserves to be looked at and for people to be actually held accountable for their actions and inactions, because this is now the grand jury stating very, very clearly that these roommates not only heard what was going on, but they were texting one another. And I would imagine that, again, what I said in the last video is that when law enforcement alluded to the fact that they gauged the timeline of this event through their phone activity, that is a very, very important factor. And I'm going to come back because I have a feeling that some of you may have thought the same as what I have. We know that there was phone activity, but do we know who was on them phones? And in fact, were the phones used to make it look like something happened at a specific time? But again, that will be in video 3/1 tomorrow. Let me know down below if you can't wait for that video. But look, this is talking about the grand jury. Is justice for these victims, is it now tilting on the edge? Because ultimately what we don't want to do, we don't want a guilty man to walk. We don't want an innocent man to lose his life, but we don't want a guilty man to walk. And what we also want is, if there are other people involved in this, then they need to be held as accountable as Brian Kohberger is, if it does go down that route. And there is this feeling around this case, there always has been a feeling that more than one person was involved. Whether it was one person involved in the actual event itself, or the information and reconnaissance that this would have taken to actually go through with it in this fashion. You know, could someone have been involved in helping the perpetrator on that night? That's what we kind of need to know. Well, we don't need to know. The case needs to clarify and act upon, because who knows? Let me know down below where you are. What do you think to this, and what have you read this article, and what are the pieces of this article that you have read that you would like sort of more thoughts and feelings on, as we can deep dive into the numerous segments of it, because this is a mind-blowing article. In my other video, the link is in the description. Go check it out, and I'll catch you all in the next one.